Hello everybody and welcome to this video where we're going to go over just a pretty general overview of the classes in World of Warcraft right here. So basically what we're going to do is just go over the classes and the roles, what the class is all about, what they can do, what races can play them, and all class, Alliance and Horde can play every class, so there's no specific or faction specific classes as of now at least. So we're just gonna do a little brief general overview of the classes. We're gonna start with Warrior here, obviously being the first one to select and everything. Warrior, as far as what races are available to play it on Alliance and Horde, there is no race in the game that cannot play Warrior. I know it's switched into different classes, but the Warrior is available for every single one of these races, as you can see. So yeah, that is nice that if you want to play a Warrior, and if you want to play a lot of classes, or I think a decent amount of classes, it's open to most, if not all, races for the classes in the game, which is nice, and Warrior is open to all of them, which is nice. As you can see, we'll just hover over this. Warriors are plate-wearing fighters who strive for perfection in armed combat. As warriors fight, they generate rage, which is used to power their abilities and special attacks. The abilities you use in the games. If you don't have any rage, you're just going to be kind of sitting there auto-attacking or using attacks that don't require that much rage. And you can see it says rolls tank or melee damage. And that's the roles that, whatever class you're hovering over, it'll tell you. Those are the roles that your class can fill with the class you choose and the specialization you choose. Those are the roles in-game that this class and its specializations can fill. And just to go over the roles briefly here, as you can see two of them right here. They're kind of like 1 and like 1A, or 2A. Of the damage category, but roles are, kind of just categories of like, you select the class and you select the specialization, which is something within the class that like kind of specializes the focus of what you do within that class and how you do damage and how you play the game and everything. So roles basically just define, like, are you a tank who takes a bunch of damage for everybody? Are you a healer that heals everybody in raids and dungeons? Or are you a damage dealer, either ranged or, melee, that, does damage to whatever you guys are trying to kill? And the roles, as I just briefly mentioned there, are tank, damage dealer, and healer. Tank basically does what you think he would do. They're basically heavy armor wearing, fighters that, are in the front of the lines, get up there and charge the enemies. Then they want to keep their attention on the tank, so it only attacks the tank. They try to tank all the damage with their heavy armor and or their shields, so that they take the damage, and the DPS, or damage dealers, and the healers aren't the ones getting attacked because they don't have as much, armor, they don't have shields to tank that damage, and they'll die a lot quicker than you will. And that's basically what tanks do, is just tank damage from enemies in the raids or dungeons that you guys are performing. And that's the role you select when you do. That's when roles mostly come into play, is when you're doing raids and you're doing dungeons, you gotta kind of define who's doing what, is basically what that is. Next is the damage dealers, and as you can see here, it's melee and ranged, and then the overall category of damage dealers as a role, obviously. So damage dealers is pretty self-explanatory as well. If you're in a dungeon or raid, whatever you guys are attacking or getting attacked by, your job is basically to do damage to that and kill it as quickly as possible, ideally, usually. And yeah, you basically just do damage to whatever is attacking you guys, and try to kill it with your ability. I know it sounds pretty straightforward and everything. It's just not that complex, really, on a base level. And the last role, let's go through something who can do it, is healer. Healers basically, again, do what they do what you would think a healer does. Your job is to kind of sit in the back or, in the group and either heal or prevent damage from coming to your allies. So basically your job is to just protect your allies through healing them, or if you're playing specific specializations of healers, maybe buffing them and giving them bonuses, healing them for, regenerating them health after they've taken damage, or preventing damage from coming to them at all. Depends on, healer by healer what you're going to do there, but generally it's to protect and support your allies, basically. So now that we got the roles out of the way, let's go back to the classes here with Warrior. As you can see, every race and faction can play him, and he can fill a tank and melee damage role. So what is the Warrior and what's his deal? As you can see kind of from the description here, as well as the little model they throw up on your screen when you select Warrior as a class, Warriors are for people who like, wearing the big armor that's, like plate in this case, which is the heaviest armor in the game, or the most protecting armor in the game. Wear big armor, swing big axes and swords, or, have big shields and swords to protect yourself as well and deal damage. Basically, you're just a heavy armor wearing, tank or melee damage dealer, basically. These guys are basically just, if you like wearing heavy armor, being in the thick of fighting, either doing damage or protecting your enemies, you'll like this as an overall class. And the specializations for this class, every class has 3 specializations, and for this it's Arms, Fury, and Protection Warrior. Arms Warrior and Fury Warrior are the melee damage specs, and Protection Tank, or Protection Warrior is the tank spec. Arms Warrior, you generally wield 1 two-handed weapon instead of the 2 that you see on the little icon here. That's for Fury, but Arms, you usually do one two-handed weapon that you use. It can be an axe like this, but you'd only have one of them basically. But yeah, they use, 1 two-handed weapon, and you kind of just specialize and using that 1 two-handed weapon, whatever it may be, and you kind of just maximize the damage you can do with that one weapon and having these huge attacks and everything, and it's just, you specialize on that weapon and doing massive blows, of damage to your enemy and big abilities and everything. It's a pretty popular choice for PvP historically, because of those massive, damage outputs and, abilities that can do massive damage or be really annoying and like kind of hamstring or annoy and I guess like hamper your enemy that you happen to be fighting basically. Next one is Fury, which is the other melee damage spec. And Fury, you basically, it's kind of what it sounds like, but you wear plate, all of them wear plate armor, but you usually dual wield two-handed weapons like you see in the little icon here. It can be axes or swords or whatever you want basically, or have available to you. And from that, you basically just specialize in using abilities to generate rage and do these like massive AoE as well, AoE attacks with them, as well as do these massive like strikes with the two-handed weapons. Basically, you want to generate rage, which is what you need to use your abilities, and those abilities are basically centered around the whole two-handed weapon thing. Either doing a flurry of attacks that do either a lot of damage to one target or AoE to several targets, basically. And the last one is Protection Warrior. Protection Warrior is a tank spec. Basically, you wear plate armor, as all of them do, but you carry a shield as well as a one-handed weapon, and you're basically focusing on tanking and taking a lot of damage from an enemy. They're tank specs, so basically you tank for your friends in dungeons and raids. Make sure you're taking damage instead of them. They're very good for tanking, always have been, especially back in the day. Um, they're very good at single target tanking. When there's one big target that they need tanking, these guys are second to none basically. They struggle a little bit compared, or at least compared to other tanks, when it comes to dealing with a shit ton of enemies that they need to try to control, like a Paladin tank, for example. But as far as single target tanking and just overall general tanking and tankiness, I guess, of the character, you'll be hard pressed to find a more suitable and classic, I guess, tank than a protection warrior. It's a lot of fun to play. I've got a character I'm leveling right now, as a fact, that is a protection warrior, or going to be, I guess. And it's a lot of fun to play, and obviously I haven't raided yet with them, but just doing dungeons. It's a lot of fun to use this guy as a tank, just because he can deflect or take so much damage, especially with like those big raid or dungeon bosses that you come across. So it's a lot of fun. Let's move on to the next class here, and Hunter. This little icon here. As far as races that can play Hunter, again, as you can see here, every race in the game can play Hunter, which is nice, so you don't have any limitations there. And as I'm not bringing in allied races to this, but again, they can also play, all of them can play Hunter. But I'm not going to talk about them the rest of the video. There's a little description and rules. They are the first pure DPS class we're going to cover. There's a few more, like the Mage, the Rogue, Warlock, other classes that are pure DPS. But they're the first one on the little screen here. They can fill the role of ranged or melee damage. So Hunters, basically what they do is they specialize. I know they say melee damage, but they specialize in doing damage with bows, crossbows, guns, and if you're doing the melee damage like spears and stuff like that, as well as, not only do they have those weapons, but they have extra utilities for being a hunter. Like, unless you're playing Marksman Hunter, which is one of the specializations available to them for ranged damage, you're going to have animal companions, as you can see over here, that kind of just help protect you and do damage to whatever you're attacking, and they're pretty cool to like have at your side. I have a hunter that I'm going to level after my Prot Warrior, just because I like, having a hunter is, it's pretty cool having the companion, plus, their weapons are cool, armors are usually pretty cool. They have these traps, as you can see here, that you can utilize in your classes, like freezing traps and stuff like that, that slow or freeze enemies. So a lot of utility here, a lot of cool, unique abilities. Very popular class, very noob friendly to class, because a lot of times they don't have a huge rotation of abilities to worry about when you're doing raids or dungeons. And you have your companion, which helps you out and can tank for you and do a lot of damage for you, so it's a pretty easy class to play in general. And it's a pretty popular and cool class to play. The armor they wear is mainly the armor that hunters wear. They wear chainmail, or in this game it's just mail armor, which is the second most protective armor in the game. And the way that goes is it goes from best to, like, I don't want to say worst, but like most protecting to least protecting. It goes plate, mail, leather, cloth. Those are the four armor types from, descending order of most protecting and least protecting. So you have pretty good protection compared to a lot of, you have pretty good protection armor-wise compared to a lot, if not basically every other ranged DPS in the game, which is nice to have because, just in case you get in a little scrap, be a little more protected than someone like a Warlock or a Mage. As well as you have your companion, which helps kind of tank and protect you. So you're a pretty survivable damage class compared to basically every other one, which is really nice to see because, who likes fucking dying? And yeah, that's a general overview of the class there. So let's go over these specializations here, and you've got three, as I mentioned earlier. Every class has three. Um, and basically, the hunter specializations are beast mastery, marksmanship, and survival. Let's go over beast mastery first, which is one of the two range damage specs in the game, or in the class. And it kind of is what it kind of sounds like. And it's you do damage with your bow or your gun or your crossbow, yeah, and from a range, and have your cool, traps and abilities for a special type of ammunition and everything. But on top of doing damage from afar with those weapons and using your abilities, you have a very focus on your animal companion and collecting them and boosting them to either tank for you more or do more damage for whatever you're attacking. So there's much heavier emphasis than any other of the other specializations on having that animal companion and utilizing and boosting his ability to tank or do damage for you as much as possible. So if you really want to kind of maximize your animal companion and have an animal companion, this is a really good specialization to choose once you choose Hunter. The next one is Marksmanship, which is the second range damage spec for Hunter. And it's kind of, I don't want to say the opposite of Beast Mastery, but it's got a very heavy emphasis on doing damage and, using your abilities and, tricks and everything with your ranged weapon and doing damage from afar. It's got a very heavy emphasis on doing damage with your bows or guns or crossbows from afar, and it kind of eliminates the emphasis or need for an animal companion. So if you want to play Hunter but you don't really care at all about the animal companion part of it, this is a good one because marksmanship generally don't have companions because they get I believe they get a bonus for damage if they don't have one with them. So you generally won't be running a companion. For some people that's a deal breaker for like, oh, I can't run that because I like having the animal with me. Some people don't like having the animal and focusing more on doing damage with your bow or whatever you use. And it's just preference really. Pretty cool class though. Do a lot of damage with your, ranged weapon there, but I personally don't really care for it just because I feel like if you're going to play Hunter, you might as well, have a companion with you and everything and kind of lean into that. But again, it's preference. It's just a different way of playing him that specializes and focuses more on you and your weapon doing more damage and boosting that as much as possible instead of doing damage from afar, but mostly focusing on maximizing your pet and his rotation. The last and most unique, I guess, of the three specializations is the melee damage spec, Survival Hunter. Survival Hunter, as it says, is mostly it's mostly a melee damage spec. You actually can use ranged weapons, I believe, with it, so you can do some damage from a range, but you're mostly going to be using the stuff like pole arms and staffs and spears, stuff like that, and using melee damage. And you will have a companion for this, but it's kind of a side note. You're not focusing on maximizing it like Beast Mastery, but you will have a companion, so it's nice if you still want one. But yeah, you're going to be using melee damage. This class has a tendency to focus more on like kind of traps and niches to do damage as well as their melee damage weapons. So like stuff like explosive, poison and venomous attacks, and throwing in their animal to also do a decent amount of damage. So it's like you do melee damage as like any other melee damage guy would do, attacking them with their spear and using abilities like that. But you also use stuff like traps and poisons and explosives, kind of these like cool little gadget things to do damage and to give debuffs or effects and stuff to an enemy. And you have your companion to kind of mix in and do damage and tank for you, depending on what type of animal and what you want them to do. So it's kind of a unique class, pretty cool class in my opinion, but it's not a very amazing specialization, and it has been that way for a while, for a lot of expansions. Um, and survival is an extremely unpopular um, spec. And this hunter is the most popular class in the game for has been at certain points for a while. I'm not sure if it is anymore, but it's a very popular class. But this specific spec is and has been for a lot of the time in World of Warcraft, has been one of, if not the least popular spec in the game, because it's not that needed, or I don't want to say like not viable, like min maxing and shit, but it's just not the best compared to other options you have, and it kind of is lacking compared to that. But it's definitely a cool and unique spec for the hunter class. And if you want to play it, I'm not saying you can't. You'll definitely find spots in dungeons and raids and guilds. Like, you still bring something to the table. They're not gonna. You'll find somebody who'll take you. Like, don't worry about that. It's just be aware that like it's a very unpopular spec, but it is kind of cool and unique. So if you want to play it, play it. Like, don't really buy into that whole crap with the viability and all that bullshit. Let's go to the next class here, a little mage, mystic, ranged damage dealer here. This is the first like kind of magic-y guy we're going to be dealing with here. As far as races available to the mage, so you can see, again, wide range. Almost every class, or almost every race in the game can play mage. Obviously Tauren can't, you can see here. But basically every other race in the entire game can play it, so still a very wide range of classes or races available to play the class. There's a little overview here. So yeah, basically they only serve one role, and that's range damage. And the type of armor these guys wear is cloth, which, as we mentioned earlier, is the least protecting armor. As you can see here, it still looks cool and everything, it just doesn't protect you as much, but it's more focused on buffing you in other stat-wise ways, as well as, they don't really need it since they're going to be at the back of the group doing all the damage and everything with their little magic spells. So they're overall pretty cool class to play if you want to do damage dealer and want to be doing damage from afar with these little magic, mystic spells and everything, and having this cool little effect armor and everything, looking like a mage, mystic dealer, whatever. And you can do your spells and depending on what spec you do, like fire, frost, or arcane, which is kind of like your classic like purple little magic-y spells, I guess. I can't really explain it very well unless he actually shows you in one of these animations here. And yeah, that's kind of a brief overview of them. They do have cool little abilities, like they can teleport and summon food and water for people, which is kind of unique quality of life things for you and your group. So it's kind of a unique class to play, kind of cool class to play, fairly popular, not bottom or top, but solid. Well, at least not for retail as of now. And they've got 3 range damage specs, and those specs are Arcane, Fire, and I think it's Frost, it's Frost. So yeah, those 3 specs. Let's start with Arcane here. And Arcane is kind of like your traditional magic-y stuff. It's like these like blue, purpley, like magic-y spells and stuff. The description of it is manipulates raw arcane magic, destroying enemies of overwhelming power and everything. And while you use mainly abilities, you usually will, for all these classes, have like a dagger or a sword or a staff or a wand with you. So you'll have something, usually, to equip, just mainly be using your spells. But Arcane, yeah. It's focusing less on the elemental side of like fire and frost, and more on the just raw magic, you know, side of things. And it's a pretty decent, you know, overall class spec. Um, if you aren't really big or have a preference into the fire or frost thing, this could be like, and you just want the more magic-y and like cool aspect of that. This is definitely a pretty cool spec. And the next one is fire, which you've seen him do here. You know, you focus really on the fire effects of everything. You know, making enemies combust and burn with, you know, little fireballs or hail of fucking like fire, like meteors or fireballs, as he just did, as I said it. And if you want more of a fire aspect to the game, obviously choose that spec for the mage. It's pretty cool looking, pretty effective, depending on, you know, the situation. And overall is a pretty good sub, you know, spec of the mage. And the last one, as you've seen him do here over here, is the frost, which obviously focuses on more icy, like blue frost magic. You know, and it's good for freezing enemies and like, you know, slowing enemies and freezing them, and then like doing this ability where you shatter them for a shit ton of damage and stuff. So it's actually a pretty good crowd control thing where you can freeze or slow enemies and then do a lot of damage to them. So brings a lot of utility to it in that way. Pretty cool, you know, little pretty cool little like subcategory. I think it's my favorite of the three, even though I'm not huge into the mage. But each one brings their own like unique play style. You know, frost slowing and, you know, freezing, arcane with little magic-y gimmicks, and fire with the you know, burn and everything. Little added bonuses there for each. Let's move on to the rogue here. A little shadow assassin-y guy right here, as you can see. Races available to play rogue. You can see pretty wide range still. Draenei can't play him. Tauren can't play him. And everybody else can play him. So that's nice. Pretty wide range. -2 races. Apart from that, as far as rogues and armor type, you're going to be wearing leather, which is third most protective, you know, second least protective. It's 3 out of 4, basically. Just a general overview of what rogue is and what he brings to the table. He's kind of this like shadowy assassin type figure, as you can kind of get a vibe for by his little animations here. You know, rogue often serves as an assassin or scout through many or lone wolves as well. Rogues can sneak around enemies and attack at opportunities behind to try and finish them off quickly, which is a pretty good description of what actually rogue does. And the rolls you fill are melee damage only. And generally, just in general, rogues are good at like sneaking around and using stealth and agility to sneak around enemies and battlefields, coming up on enemies, you know, when they don't expect it, or, you know, behind them, or just choosing good opportunities to attack, doing a shit ton of damage, you're doing poison and little annoying overtime effects, and hopefully killing them rather efficiently or rather quickly. And that's just a pretty general overview of what rogues do, combat-wise there. As you can see, the weapons they like to use are, you know, one-handed, like daggers, axes, swords, maces, stuff like that. And they've got 3 specializations, all of which are melee damage, as you can see from the rules there. And the 3 specializations available to them are Assassination, Outlaw, and I don't know, I'm going to mispronounce this, but just I'll explain it after. Subtly, I believe. Maybe that wasn't as hard, but either I horribly mispronounced it or very easily pronounced it, so we'll see. Let's start with Assassination, which kind of gives you a general overview just in the word of its, you know, word in of itself there, of what this thing likes to do. And, you know, you basically just kind of sneak up on enemies with your little daggers and your little poisons with your daggers, and sneak up on enemies, do a shit ton of damage with your daggers and your poisons. Then either just keep killing them or run away and hide and stuff. Come back up on another enemy, the same one. Do a lot of damage, then kill them or fade away, and then come back. General mystic, like little shadow annoying dudes that kind of skulk around the battlefield, attacking you at really annoying or random times, coming out of nowhere, doing a lot of damage. The poison or the daggers or both, killing you or just healing you or not, or just fading away and coming back later. So pretty good class, spec. Kind of the I guess poster spec, because that's what everyone kind of thinks of. The dagger wielding, poison wielding, shadow like assassin. So that's kind of what everyone thinks of with a rogue anyways. But they do have other specs like outlaw. And these guys can use more stuff like maces, axes, swords, and fist weapons. So you're getting like bigger weapons and stuff, and the description is a ruthless fugitive who uses agility and guile to stand toe-to-toe with enemy. So obviously, still an emphasis on sneakiness and agility, but also more of a actual combat and face-to-face fighting with an enemy, more than backstabbing them with a dagger and some poison. You have more of an emphasis on actually fighting with an opponent in this spec, but still you do want agility and stealth and everything, so you still get that mix into it as well. And the last one is subtlety. Hopefully I pronounced that right. I feel like I am, but I don't know, that's a weird word. Maybe it isn't, I'm just an idiot. But description, they use daggers, but the description is a dark stalker who leaps from the shadows to ambush your unsuspecting prey. Preferred weapons, daggers. So obviously use daggers, leather armor, and kind of again what the rogue is more known for is using agility and using your little skulking abilities to kind of jump out of nowhere onto an opponent and kill them and do a bunch of damage with your daggers on them. Again, pretty known, what the rogues are kind of known for. Skulking, hiding, then jumping on you when you don't expect them to, and doing a shit ton of damage and probably killing you. Which is, pretty annoying class to fight against, or, these are the poster, like, ninja looters class, basically, because they can just kind of sneak up there and take whatever fucking loot and kill you and your guild or dungeon group have been, trying to get for a while. So, generally one of the less liked class by other people interacting with them, but can be fun for people playing them, I guess, even though I haven't. Let's get on to the next one here, Priest. Little divine guy. Type of armor, you're going to be wearing cloth with Priest. So yeah, not a bunch of protection, but generally you probably shouldn't need it, since you're going to be in the back with the healers or the damage dealers, depending on what type of priest you are. So race is available to the priest. As you can see here, we're going to go through them. A large selection, both factions. Everyone but orcs can play priest. As you can see here, literally every other race but an orc can play him. So unless you're dead set on playing an orc with a priest, you should be fine. Let's go over a general overview of priest. These guys are like, probably should switch back to it. These guys are kind of like holy, healers or damage dealers. Basically, the healing part of them, they use, holy little magic to heal and protect and support allies with their, spells and abilities and everything. And their damage side kind of uses shadow magic to do damage from afar. Kind of like a warlock type of vibe, but a little different, I guess. And, yeah, let's get into, the specs here. You've got 3... You've got 2 healing specs, and you've got 1 damage specs. Specs are Shadow is the damage spec, range damage, and the healing ones are Discipline and Holy. Let's start with Discipline, and we'll go with the healing ones first, talk about Shadow at the end. So Discipline. Preferred weapons are Staff, Wand, Dagger, and Maces. Use magic to shield allies from taking damage as well as heal their wounds. So, pretty good overview of actually what the class is. You kind of focus on as a healer, it's kind of a unique way of healing, but you kind of focus, while you do have abilities to heal, and you definitely should be healing your allies, you not only focus on just directly healing them, but you also focus on, doing damage and preventing your allies from taking damage in the first place. If they don't take damage, you don't have to heal them, type of thing. So it's a kind of unique way of looking at healing and doing healing in this game. And for the priest, basically just focus on using your abilities and everything to shield allies from taking damage while also healing them if you need to, if they take a bunch of damage. Next we got the Holy Speck. Preferred weapons of Staff, Wand, Dagger, and Mace, which is what they can use. The description is a versatile healer who can reverse damage on individuals or groups and even heal from beyond the grave, which is kind of cool. So, Holy is almost kind of like your stereotypical healer in any type of game like this. They focus on just doing raw healing on, your group or one ally or a specific group of allies. They basically just, they're not focused on preventing you from taking damage. They just have abilities that specifically are meant to do healing, just raw healing. So you take damage, these are the guys who are going to use a little golden light beam on you or whatever and just heal you up for however many points of health they can, or you need. And so it's kind of just a straightforward raw healing power on your enemy or your allies or a specific person. Pretty straightforward, solid class for healing. If you want to just focus on healing, doing raw healing, kind of stereotypical type of guy, good spec for you. Last priest is the range damage spec of the priest, which is Shadow Priest. Preferred weapons are Staff, Wand, Dagger, or Mace. Use a sinister shadow magic and terrifying void magic to eradicate enemies. So basically you're kind of a ranged magic damage dealer. You kind of have dark magic, kind of like a Warlock, almost, to do damage with these like kind of shadowy, mysterious, dark magic spells that, just do like dark magic damage, I guess, to your enemies, kind of like a Warlock or a Mage spell would do, and I think you have some AoE focuses maybe, like a Warlock. So I feel like it's kind of the Priest Warlock version, which we'll get to next class of Warlock. That's kind of the joke, I guess, is you're kind of just a Priest Warlock, do this dark damage, dark magic, you do damage to your enemies and AoE and stuff. So kind of if you want to play a priest and have the option of even switching to healer at some point, but you want to do damage as well, solid spec, kind of like a Warlock, I guess is the best way to explain it without directly showing you. And yeah, general overview of the priest there. Let's go to the Warlock here. So, Warlocks. Races available to play Warlock. You can see Night Elves can't play it. Draenei can't play it. Pandaren can't play it. Tauren can't play it. And that is it. Every other race but the Pandaren, Draenei, the Night Elves, these are the races. This is actually a better way to show you. These are all the ones that are flashing with the icons, are the ones you can play. It's just the Tauren, Pandaren, Draenei, and Night Elves that can't play it, basically. Let's get a little overview there. They are range damage focused class. That's the only role they can do. And as far as type of armor you're going to be wearing, although it does look like kind of metal on his little armor there, it is just cloth. That is what you're going to be doing as far as armor wise goes. But just a general overview of the Warlock. You're kind of a dark magic, sorcerer type of guy. You do damage from afar with these little dark magic, like fire spells almost, that are kind of similar to a fire mage type of things. Or you can do like AoE, curse spells that, are powerful spells that do a lot of damage over time, and poisons and, curses and stuff. And you can summon these little, void, hellish, like, creatures to your side, like imps and void walkers and stuff, are two of the more iconic ones. As you can see here, it's almost like, yeah, this is the only other class with, like, pets, basically, but obviously very different type of pet. And that can be helpful for, dealing damage, dealing extra damage, and protecting you. So pretty fast leveling class, pretty easy class to play as well, just like the Hunter in that regard. And the free specializations, all range damage, of course, are Affliction, Demonology, and Destruction. So just go over them. With Affliction first. Affliction is kind of like what you think a Warlock would be. He kind of uses these Warlocky sorcerer and magic spells and curses, and focuses a lot on doing AoE, not AoE, but damage over time effects, where he has these powerful abilities, but they do a lot of damage not directly and immediately, but they do a lot of damages over time. A lot of, negative effects and damages over time spells, which is pretty cool and useful to have in a group when doing something like a raid. Pretty cool to play as well, just in general. And that's kind of the Affliction Warlock's focus. Preferred weapons are Staff, Wand, Dagger, and Sword. And yeah, just drains and damage over time is what Affliction's all about, shadow magic, stuff like that. Let's go next to Demonology. Demonology is kind of like the beast mastery of Warlocks. You're basically focusing on a lot more on maximizing the little summons you can do, like the imps and the void walkers and everything else. A commander of demons who twists the souls of his army into devastating power. So yeah, there is the other Warlock spells and curses you get access to, of course, but you have a much more focus on using and maximizing the potential and damage of the demons that you summon, like the imps, for example, you can see here. And preferred weapons are Staff, Wand, Dagger, and Sword. Last spec here is Destruction. Preferred weapons, Staff, Wand, Dagger, and Sword. A master of chaos who calls down fire to burn and demolish enemies. Destruction is almost kind of like a fire mage warlock, basically. You really focus on the fire magic, doing like fireballs and calling down like fire meteors to destroy and do damage and burn your enemies. So if you want to focus more on the magic-y fire side of the whole range damage shit with the Warlock, this is definitely the spec to go for you. Next spec, we got Paladin here, the little Warriors of Light type shit over here. And Paladin, race is available. You got the humans, the dwarfs, not the night elves, not the gnomes, the Draenei, not the Worgen. You got not the Pandaren, not the goblins. You got the blood elves. You got not the trolls. The Tauren can play them. The undead cannot play them, and the orcs cannot play them. Only the humans, dwarves, Draenei, blood elves, and Tauren can play Paladin. As far as non-ally races goes. So yeah, more limited class as far as what races you get to play with them, which kind of sucks, but is what it is. Just make sure you got them. They can fill the role of all three types of roles. They can be tanks, healers, or damage dealers, specifically melee damage dealers. And another interesting thing is they also wear plate. All three tank, healer, and melee damage can wear plate, which is the most protecting armor in the game and coolest in my opinion. So you're very protected no matter what spec you go into, because you're wearing the heaviest armor in the game, as well as potentially a shield if you go the tank spec. So pretty good protection there. Nice to be able to wear. I like wearing plate armor and mail armor protecting, but that's just me because I like heavier hitting and more tanky guys. You got 3 specs, obviously one for each of the different roles there. You got Holy, Protection, and Retribution. Overall, Paladin focuses on using kind of holy magic and divine light to do damage to your enemies, buff your allies, heal your allies, and protect your allies, as well as do damage or whatever is killing you. Kind of like a holy warrior, but not only can you do damage like a warrior, you can also buff and heal and stuff like that. So it's kind of warrior of light type of vibe. First spec is holy. That's the healing spec, but you can still wear plate, I believe. And preferred weapons are sword, mace, and shield. Invokes the power of light to heal and protect allies and vanquish evil from the darkest corners of the world. So yeah, kind of like a holy priest, where you heal your allies and stuff, kind of just straightforward, just heal. But on top of the healing and everything, not only do you do that, which is obviously a primary bonus and focus of the healer, Holy Paladins have a pretty heavy emphasis on providing buffs, to your allies. So little cooldown buffs where, it can be like do more damage or stuff. There's a lot of buffs, but you basically give out a lot of buffs to a lot of different people, so that it boosts whatever stat the buff does. So not only a focus on healing your allies, but also on supporting and buffing them, which is a pretty cool and very wanted and liked aspect of the Holy Paladin. Which is why Holy Paladins have always been rather well liked, because they can provide you with a bunch of buffs and heals. Next is the Protection Paladin, which is their tank spec. Preferred weapons are the sword, mace, axe, and shield. Uses holy magic to shield and defend allies from attackers. Yeah, you kind of focus on, obviously you got your plate armor, your shield, and your weapon. You kind of focus on taking a bunch of damage and tanking, obviously. But not only do you kind of just plainly and like straightforward tanking like a protection warrior, because you can still do that, but not only do you do that, but you kind of focus on, supporting them at the same time. I believe you can kind of support your team at the same time, and you tank, and you're very good at AoE tanking. These guys have always been kind of the de facto AoE tanks. You're very good at dealing with and doing damage and protecting everybody from a lot of smaller enemies. So when there's a lot of enemies attacking you guys, no one's better than dealing with it than the Protection Paladin, because you are very good at doing AoE tanking. You're not as good as Warrior for single target tanking, but if you want AoE tanking, you're much better than a Warrior would be. But you're still pretty solid at single target tanking, I guess, as well. And you can still do it. So yeah, that wraps up that. Let's go to Retribution, which is the DPS spec, melee damage spec of the Paladin. Preferred weapons: two-handed sword, mace, and axe. A righteous crusader who judges and punishes opponents with weapons and holy magic. So yeah, basically more of a focus on using big two-handed weapons to do a bunch of damage with those and your abilities regarding that. You can also use some little holy magic to throw some spice in there. Stuff like buffs your weapon and does direct damage to enemies through magic. As well as I think you still get some buffs. I might be wrong on that, but you might. So yeah, kind of a focus on that and doing damage instead of tanking or healing. So overall, pretty versatile. Holy warrior here, can do it all. Pretty cool class to play. Pretty liked class, I guess, for the buffs if you're playing healer especially. Overall, just solid class to play. Next we got Druid. As far as Druid, only available for the Night Elf, the Worgen, the Trolls, and the Tauren. Those are the only 4 classes that can play them. So yeah, kind of limited there, but it is what it is again. Um, and let's go over this. As you can see here, they have a pretty wide range of stuff and roles they can fill here. Druids can fill tank, healer, range damage, or melee damage, so pretty wide range there. And you're going to be wearing leather armor, which is, third on the list of most protecting, better than cloth, but nothing else. And, yeah, druids they're basically just, the class description, versatile combatants that can fulfill nearly every role, which, not nearly, they just can fulfill, like, every role. Healing, tanking, damage dealing is critical that druids tailor the form they choose to the situation, as each form bears a specific purpose. Yeah, basically druid, you get these different forms of different animals you can transform into, and each animal form has a specific type of like specialization stuff they can do. As you can see here, you can transform to like something like that. Each animal has a different specific ability and strength, either tanking, healing, or doing damage. The cat you see him turn into there is, I believe, a damage-focused transformation. And yeah, you kind of have 4 specializations here, which is kind of unique. And the specializations for Druid are Balance, Feral, Guardian, and Restoration. Balance is have preferred weapons of staff, dagger, and mace for weapons, and can shapeshift into a powerful moonkin, balancing the power of arcane and nature magic to destroy enemies. So this is a ranged damage spec, basically. When you transfer into the moonkin, you do a lot of, arcane and nature magic, so kind of like an arcane mage, but you also throw in these kind of like green, like nature magic you can see here, to do kind of unique little spells and, abilities to destroy enemies that way. The next one, you got Feral. Preferred weapons are staffs and polearms. Takes on the form of a great cat, which you've seen transform into here a few times, to deal damage with bleeds and bites. So basically, transforming this cat, who I believe is pretty quick. You get a lot of agility with him, and you do a lot of damage with him. Is the main focus of this. You do bites and bleeds, bites, and everything. You do a lot of damage with your main attacks and big hitting bites and stuff like that. But you can also bleed, which does damage over time, and powerful abilities like that. So melee damage here with more heavy hitting stuff like heavy hitting stuff, as well as damage over time effects from bleeds and stuff, as well as increased mobility with the cat form, which is cool. Next we got Guardian here. Preferred weapons of staff and polearm. Takes on the form of a mighty bear to absorb damage and protect allies. So this is the tanking spec of the druid. You transform into a big old bear, which actually looks pretty cool, and you basically do damage in that form. Your damage isn't great compared to the other ones, but it's something, I guess. And it's mainly a tanking spec, so your main thing is to draw the focus of the enemies and protect your allies in bear form from that. As in bear form, you're pretty tanky and you can take a decent amount of damage. Pretty solid tank, actually, and definitely a cool and unique way to tank, since you're not like a human-ish form type of guy with a shield and a weapon. You're a bear. Do a decent amount of damage, and you're pretty tanky and reliable as a tank. So pretty cool little tank and spec there to choose from if you want to tank with these dudes. Last one is Restoration, which is the healing one. Preferred weapon of staff, daggers, and maces, and channels powerful nature magic to regenerate and revitalize allies. Basically, yeah, you basically just use your little nature magic you can see there and do healing for your enemies. You basically, you kind of focus on just using that to raw heal whatever enemy or whatever allies need healing in your group, and it's fair enough, pretty solid little healing spec, and it's kind of cool. There's a whole nature magic thing. It looks kind of unique. Overall, Druid's a very unique and versatile class. Do any role you want. Kind of transform into these different animals and use nature magic and kind of look like a shaman type of thing, even though get to that later. Um, Overall, pretty solid class. Pretty fun and unique class and versatile. Definitely a solid pick. Actually got Shaman here. Shaman's playable by dwarfs, Draenei, Pandaren, goblins, trolls, orcs, and Tauren. So let's get to somebody who can actually play this real quick. This little animation there. And overall, druids are versatile combatants in that they can fulfill nearly every role, healing, tanking, and damage dealing. It's critical that druids tailor the form they choose. Oh wait, druids. Yeah, okay. Wrong class description. But they kind of do have an earthy vibe, similar to the druids, which is probably why I mixed them up. This is the overview and roles. They can do healing, they can do range damage, or they can do melee damage. They can't tank, but everything else they can do. This is the actual class description. During combat, Shaman plays damaging and controlling totems on the ground to maximize their effectiveness while hindering their enemies. Shamans are versatile enough to battle foes up close or at range, for why Shamans choose their avenue of attack based on their enemy's strength and weaknesses. The armor type is you're going to be wearing mail armor, and you can, I believe you can use shields with these dudes too, maybe. And you got 3 specs: an elemental, enhancement, and restoration. Just a general overview. You kind of use this like cool little electric and earth magic to not only do damage but summon these little totems that you can see here. And these totems do a wide variety of things depending on what totems you place down. They can buff you and your allies, you know, give you like bonuses to like abilities and movement and stuff like that, or damage. And they can also hinder your enemies and damage your enemies, either damaging them or slowing their movements and stuff like that. So you've got these, not only this magic and stuff to focus on doing damage, but these totems that are really cool because they can provide a wide range of use and, you know, effectiveness and type of versatility in them. They can do damage and hinder enemies, and they can buff and heal your allies, as well as your own magic you can heal allies if you're doing the healer spec, which is pretty cool there. So let's go into the specs here, dive a little deeper into the Shaman. The 3 specs that you have available to you playing Shaman are Elemental, Enhancement, and Restoration. First one's Elemental, which is a spellcaster who harnesses the destructive forces of nature and the elements. So obviously range damage there. Preferred weapons are maces, daggers, and shields. Or this is just a damage dealer, by the way. DPS. And obviously you can use weapons, but you also have a focus on these little earth and shock lightning magic effects to do damage with that. And you really focus on using your little nature and elemental lightning and magic spells from here, as you can see, to do damage to your enemies. And it's a pretty cool like little damage dealer here because you have to use these cool elemental like shock and fire spells to do damage. So overall pretty cool. Next one is an enhancement. Totemic or totemic totem, I don't know. Totemic warrior who strikes foes with weapons imbued with elemental power. Preferred weapons, dual axes, maces, and fist weapons. So obviously use your little, whatever weapons you're using, as well as whatever dual weapons you're using, as well as totems and elemental powers and abilities you get as a shaman, and you kind of do damage, melee mainly. This is the melee damage, more focused one. You use your weapons to do damage, as well as buffs you get from totems and abilities to do more elemental damage with your weapons and stuff like that. So kind of a melee damage with like buffs to your weapons from totems and abilities to do elemental damage on top of the damage you're doing with your weapons and abilities as well. So kind of a cool little earthbound shaman like magic warrior type of vibe. Last one you got here is Restoration, which is your healer spec. A healer who calls upon ancestral spirits and the cleansing power of water to mend allies' wounds. Preferred weapons are maces, daggers, and shields. What you do for restoration healing to shamans is you use these little water healing abilities you get to do healing and AoE healing to your ally or allies. And it's a pretty cool little animation because you get these like water splashing abilities on your enemies that do a bunch of raw healing to them. So if, it's kind of like a holy priest where it's not overtime or protecting your guys healing type of thing. It's do a shit ton of healing, as long as the ability's going all at once there with one ability. And yeah, it's pretty cool because you get the water aspect of it in. You also get the totems as well that can heal and buff and support your or your allies while hindering some of your enemies depending on what totem. So you get these, unique water healing spells and effects, as well as the totems that buff and support your allies and hinder your enemies, which is really cool. Added kind of versatility and little added functionality to that. So it's a pretty cool and pretty useful healer to have in your group. And overall, Shaman Restoration, as well as the whole class, is very cool to play. Overall, Shaman, very versatile class. Big focus on like elemental and earthbound, like magic and buffs and abilities and totems to do different buffs and abilities and damage and healing. So pretty cool class to play. Let's move on to the monk here. As you can see, monk can be played by dwarfs, Draenei, Pandaren, goblins, trolls, Tauren, and orcs. Let's get to a class. We'll do it with the Pandaren since it's their class, basically. See a little overview here. They can fill all three roles here: tank, healer, and melee damage. They can't do range damage, but they can do damage as a whole, so they can fill all three roles on a base level. So yeah, monks, pretty Kung Fu Panda vibe class. Generally, overview is whatever their combat role, monks rely mainly on their hands and feet to do the talking, and are on strong connection with the inner chi to power their abilities. Monk can also heal their allies while at the same time damaging their enemies. So yeah, kind of like a melee focused class on all regards here. Instead of using weapons, you use a lot of your like kicking and punching attacks, kind of like a Kung Fu Panda, like Kung Fu martial artist type of vibe here. And it's a pretty cool and weird and unique class to play. You wear leather armor, by the way, which is again third most protecting, which is kind of weird since if you're like tanking, you wonder why you're wearing leather, but you get this ability where you can stagger and take damage over time instead of all at once, so you can be healed up better, and it still works. It's still a very good tank. And yeah, pretty unique class here. Rely on like pole arms as well as fists and feet, and kung fu, little martial art abilities and shit. They do damage and support and heal yourself and your allies. So pretty cool class overall. You got 3 specs here, 1 for each type of role. You got Brewmaster Monk, you got Mistweaver Monk, and you've got Brewmaster, Mistweaver, and Windwalker. That's the damage spec. First up is Brewmaster, which is the tank spec. A sturdy brawler who uses unpredictable movement and mystical brews to avoid damage and protect allies. Preferred weapons are staffs and polearms. So Brewmaster is your tank spec. Basically, you focus on, instead of just using a heavy armor and shield and everything to tank damage, you still gain the attention and keep the attention of your enemy, but you use these like little brews, as well, like these little brews that you concoct, as well as your abilities and movement and everything, to either avoid taking the damage at all when it hits you, or staggering the damage out over time so you don't take the damage all at once and you're just screwed because you have leather armor and stuff or not as much protection. But you do, the damage hits you in burst over time so that you can kind of counteract it with other brews that eliminate that damage, or you can be healed up by your healers so you don't just instantly die and they don't have a chance to heal you at all. So that's kind of how they tank and don't die. Pretty unique and kind of useful way to avoid damage and tank, as well as nice because the healers can have time to react and heal you. So yeah, pretty cool little unique way to tank there. And Brewmaster Monk is actually one of my, if not my most played and like main character. It's a lot of fun to play. You get this kung fu fighting like damage shit with your abilities that do damage, and stagger so you don't just instantly get fucking like wiped off the earth. You just take damage over time, and you can eliminate that with other brews, or just outright block the damage with some brews, and because it'll take so much of the damage for you without actually doing damage to you and your health bar. Then you can get healed up if you need to over time because you're not just instantly dead, which is nice. Next up is Mistweaver. Mistweaver is the heal spec of the monk. A healer who masters their mysterious art of manipulating life energies, aided by their wisdom of the Jade Serpent. Preferred weapons are staffs, maces, and swords. And Mistweavers are a pretty cool little healing spec. They kind of got this green mist and energy that like goes around them and their allies to heal them. You do a lot of damage kind of in the same way every other spec does, with the little kung fu fighting and everything. And while you're doing that, you got these little abilities and bonuses and everything that heals certain targets or people around you. So a lot of AoE healing, I think AoE healing, as well as random like little misty like green healing abilities you can put on different targets of your choice around you, as well as doing a kind of cool amount of AoE and specific target damage with your little kung fu fighting shit that pandas and the monks do. So pretty cool healer, pretty fun healer in class overall, honestly, for that. Next you got your Windwalker, which is your melee damage spec. This is the really, kung fu fighting one because you're actually focused mainly on doing damage in this spec, obviously, with your fists and your kicks and being a, kung fu panda type of here. If that's the race you choose, which is like they're kind of the poster children for pandas, because when Pandora and the expansion came out, this is when the class came out, so it's kind of their whole thing. But Windwalkers' preferred weapons are fist weapons, axes, maces, and swords. It's a martial artist without peer, who pummels foes with hands and fist. So basically you use all of your cool little, rolling and punching and kung fu panda abilities and kicks there and everything, your martial arts, to do the damage to your enemies. You got little cool abilities to do that, like flying kicks and, spinning kicks, rolling in there and doing these little punches that you see here. Pretty funny and cool little way of doing damage and playing the game. It's actually a pretty solid damage dealer. Can definitely pump it out, and is definitely a pretty cool and funny way to play the class and play the game here, because who doesn't like being a panda, rolling in, doing a little kick and doing these little force punches and abilities to boost that and do a lot of damage with that. And the one ability that they're famous for is, God, I can't remember, even though I play it so much, it's like Touch of Death or something, which basically just like punch or touch something, it just does an ungodly amount of damage to the target, takes out a shit ton of their health or kills them. Very powerful ability, but it's got a pretty decent cooldown to counteract its OP-ness. Yeah, that's kind of the Windwalker and the Monk. Pretty funny and fun class to play, very versatile, obviously it's filling all roles. Kind of a different class compared to the other ones. I really like the whole fighting with your hands and feet, like martial arts vibe you get from this class. Very fun class. Unique way to tank, heal, and do damage with the martial arts and the bruise and everything. And the mist weaving, like green chi spirit healing. Very fun class to play. Definitely recommend you check it out. I had a lot of fun leveling and playing my guy still. So yeah. Next up is the Demon Hunter. It can be played by your Night Elves and it can be played by your Blood Elves. So very limited selection of class or races to choose from, which kind of sucks. But if you want to play them, just play one of those, I guess. So let's get up the Night Elves here. Select the Demon Hunter. See, pretty edgy guy here. Edgy class. As you can see, this is the description of it. You can fill a tank or melee damage rules. And yeah, definitely focus on this little like demon aspect of yourself, as well as the little, oh, there you see, a little transform into that, do a bunch of damage and stuff, and little green scythe magic weapons and powers. Overall, forging heavy armor, demon hunters capitalize on speed, closing the distance quickly to strike enemies with one-handed weapons. However, Illidari must also use their agility defensively to ensure their battles end favorably. So focus on agility, getting in, striking quickly, doing a shit ton of damage, and hopefully winning or getting out and positioning yourself correctly. So if that sounds appealing, cool class to play. And if you like the whole art style and transforming into this fucker, pretty cool class to play overall. They have 2 specializations, which obviously, only 2, so you're kind of more limited. Obviously 1 for tank and 1 for melee damage. The specs available for Demon Hunter are Havoc and Vengeance. Havoc is the first one we're going to cover. Preferred weapon, Warglaives, which you see right here. Swords, axes, and fist weapons. And Havoc is a brooding master of Warglaives and the destructive powers of fell magic. So this is the melee damage spec, by the way, and basically what it does is you kind of focus on these little warglaive weapons you get, as well as the little like green magic-y shit, to use your abilities and buff yourself and do a shit ton of damage with that. Got to focus on agility, getting in quick, doing these little buffs and abilities, and doing a shit ton of damage to your target, and with your little warglaives too, and getting in and out. So yeah, pretty cool little quick strike, do a bunch of damage, agility focus, heavy hitting damage dealer with the little unique weapons and energy magic here, which I like. Kind of a cool vibe there. Next spec is Vengeance, which is your tank spec. Preferred weapons are warglaives, swords, axes, and fist weapons. Embraces the demon within to incinerate enemies and protect their allies. So obviously the demon you've seen this dude switch to a few times here is kind of what you'll be focusing on when you're tanking here, as he's tanker. So you'll transform into that a lot and tank for your enemy or your allies, as it's harder to kill that guy, obviously. And you're focused on being in that form with your little warglaives or whatever weapons you're using at the time, and using your buff, like tankiness, as well as your abilities and magic to protect yourself and your allies and tank a bunch of damage with, that, and also dish out a little bit with your warglaives and your ability as well, just like every other tank. So yeah, pretty solid, little cool, unique tank where you transform into that, and can be a demon and stuff. Looks cool. You got unique weapons. Overall, Demon Hunter is pretty solid class and everything. Pretty fun, unique class, definitely. Kind of looks cool. Got your little green magic-y glowing stuff, your unique weapons. Turn into a demon prince or whatever. Yeah, cool overall class. Got. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of their tanks, but they're fine if you want to tank with them, and their damage is fun. Do a bunch of damage, you got a bunch of agility and stuff. Also, they wear leather armor. I forgot to mention that. You'll be rocking leather armor for Demon Hunters, which is cool. let's go on to the last one here. Let's find a class I can't play him so I can show him better. You got your Demon Hunters. Or, not the Demon Hunters. Who can't play Death Knight? Can everybody play Death Knight? Ah. So, next up is your little Death Knight here. Let's get to him. Every race can play Death Knight. He can fill the role of tank and melee damage, similarly, but he has 3 specs, not just 2 like the Demon Hunter. And played by every race. Wears plate armor, which is the heavy, or not, I don't even, maybe that, I don't, do they have weight values in this? But it's the biggest and the most protecting. Class information, Death Knights engage their foes up close, supplementing swings of their weapons with dark magic that renders enemies vulnerable or damages them with unholy power. They drag foes into one-on-one conflicts, compelling them to focus their attacks away from weaker companions to prevent their enemies from fleeing their grasp. Death Knights must remain mindful of the powers they call from forth from runes and pace their attacks appropriately. So pretty solid overview there, as well as the little bio you get in the corner here. Obviously, you know, you get big weapons, 2-handed weapons, you wear plate armor, you get up close and personal with your guys, you do these big swings with them and boosted by your little abilities, getting big swings and damage with your 2-handed weapons, as well as use your own like little magic and abilities, and Death Knight magic and Unholy magic to, you know, supplement it and do damage and, you know, debuff the enemy that you're attacking, as well as, you know, doing the damage with your sword or axe or whatever you're using. And yeah, pretty cool mix there. And you've got, you know, your little cool unique magic to go along with it and supplement just the raw hacking and slashing and abilities you get there. As far as specializations, they can do tank and melee damage. They've got 3 specs here. The 3 specs of Death Knight are Blood. Wait, there's Blood, there is Frost, and there's Unholy. Those are the 3 specs. First one we're going to talk about is Blood. A dark guardian who manipulates and corrupts life energy to sustain herself in the face of an enemy onslaught. Preferred weapon, 2-handed axes, maces, and sword. So Blood, focusing on mainly just survivability and tankiness is basically what your focus is on there. You use your, you know, life energy and your magic and everything, as well as just effective way plate armor to make yourself tankier and obviously harder to kill. This way you can survive longer and take more damage, and, you know, draw more attention to yourself and take more punishment from whatever enemies are attacking you in your group. So that's how you kind of tank as this dude, is just kind of being more survivable than the other specs. I don't think he's a very popular tank. I could be wrong. I have to check like WoW analytics or something. But yeah, definitely a weird tank. Just because, well, one, you don't have a shield, but that's not unique to just this guy. But you kind of just make yourself tankier with abilities and like magic that you have available to you, and just kind of make yourself more survivable and tanky, on top of the fact that you wear plate and everything. So if you kind of like the whole undead, edgy, like Dark Lord feel of, you know, the Death Knight, and want to use all of the stuff that comes with that, but want to be survivable and tanky and tank for your dungeon or raid group, definitely a good spec, good class to choose. Next is Frost, an icy harbinger of doom, channeling runic power and delivering vicious weapon strikes. Preferred weapons of dual axes, maces, and swords. Obviously a melee damage spec here. Blood is tank, by the way, but Frost melee damage. Obviously you focus on not only using just your weapons to just do damage with your abilities, but you also throw in the little Frost abilities and attacks to throw in some variety and utility to the raw melee damage that you do with your weapon there. So it's a pretty good combo and mix there. Pretty cool class to play. Um, Pretty cool melee damage since you get the frost included with the just raw melee damage power of having 2 swords or axes. So cool little class there. And the last one we got is Unholy Speck. A master of death and decay, spreading infection and controlling undead minions to do her bidding. Preferred weapon: 2-handed axes, maces, and swords. And basically, it's kind of pretty good description there. Covers it up. Is you got a melee damage spec here, who obviously use your weapons to do damage and abilities to do damage with that, but you use infections to add on, little DOTs and do little debuffs and damage that way with those abilities, as well as doing the damage on top of that with your weapons. And you get to control little undead minions here that you've seen him like summoning in the background. Here you get these control of these undead minions to help you fight and do damage and everything, which is really cool because you get to kind of summon stuff, be like almost like a necromancer type of thing, where you get to summon undead to help fight with you, which is cool. So pretty cool and useful and fairly good damage spec there. Definitely a pretty solid little damage spec, and overall the class is pretty fun to play. Definitely got a unique vibe to it. Kind of got a necromancer, undead, like little keen little lord vibe there, because you can summon the dead. Obviously, you got this little frost like undead vibe going to you, which looks really cool and why a lot of people play it. You get plate armor, which is always good. You get the big 2-handed weapons and stuff. You get the unholy little, like, toxic infection stuff for the frost added on, or you can be a blood knight and buff yourself and make yourself really tanky and survivable if you'll magic and unholy magic you see there. So overall, pretty solid and cool little class to play. And that wraps it up here. As you can see, we've gone through all the classes and provided a pretty good overview, and brief overview and general overview of them. Hope this gave you a decent idea of what the classes in World of Warcraft are all about, a little about what they can do, and helps you maybe narrow down what you'd like to play and what you think is cool to play and you want to maybe try out or play for the first time. It's pretty cool. As well as one last thing to mention is you can, if you're creating a character, you can click this little class trial button and it creates a new character for you that's already like level 50. And for a limited little time you can try out this character for a limited time that's already at level 50, so you can get an even better feel for the class if you're already interested in playing it. And then if you want to permanently unlock it, as you can see, you can use a character boost token to unlock the character permanently after that. So definitely something to consider there as well if you want to considering a class. So yeah, I hope that gave you a pretty good, decent overview of the classes and some of the functionality and what they're all about. Hope that kind of helped you make up your mind or narrow it down a little bit or get a better feel for the game and their classes and what they can do and who can play them. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.